Good evening. This is the regular meeting of the Ross Town Council, Thursday, December 9. Welcome, everybody. Item number 1 is the roll call.
Yes, let's take roll call. Councilmember Breckus.
Aye.
And Councilmember Kircher.
Here.
And Councilmember Cool.
Here.
Councilmember McMillan.
Here.
And Mayor Robbins.
Here. Item number 2, posting of the agenda. Was it posted?
Yes, it is.
And item number 3, minutes. There were some edits that Linda sent around. Is there a motion to approve those edited minutes, or are there other edits? Julie?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool.
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher.
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan.
Aye.
And Mayor Robbins.
Aye.
And the minutes are adopted as amended.
Thank you. Item 4, demands. Have the demands been met?
Yes, they have.
Thank you. And item number 5 is Town Council introduction and welcome to Town Manager Krista Johnson. So the Ross Town Council is delighted to introduce Krista Johnson, our new town manager. She replaces Joe Chin, who has retired. Krista has over 25 years of local government management experience, most recently serving as city manager of the city of Del Mar in San Diego County. She was assistant city manager in the city of Laguna Beach from 2011 to 2020 and served in the same capacity for the town of Windsor in Sonoma County. Prior to that, she held positions with the city of Alameda for 8 years and also in the county of Alameda. And in the mid-90s, she worked locally for an environmental education nonprofit, the Headlands Institute in the Marin Headlands. Krista began her role as Ross Town Manager on November 8. Welcome, Krista.
Oh, thank you so much, Mayor, and wanted to thank you and the entire Town Council for the opportunity to serve you and the Ross community as your town manager. Thank you very much. Today is my 20th day.
Wow.
And yeah, and the council and town staff and the residents that I've met so far have all been very welcoming and super helpful to me. I know I have very big shoes to fill, literally, as Joe Chin was really an excellent town manager. I was able to overlap with him for in my first week, and he really made a great effort to prepare for my arrival and smooth the transition, and I'm very thankful for that. My colleagues from our neighboring towns here and also regional agencies have been welcoming and helpful. And Ross is just really an extraordinarily beautiful and special place. And I'm excited to be here and working with the council and our staff team and our community on projects and topics that are important to you. So thanks again for the opportunity and the warm welcome.
Well, and thank you. We're looking forward to working with you. Item number 6 is the open time for public expression. It's limited to 3 minutes per speaker and on items not on the agenda. The council can't discuss items that aren't on the agenda, so we will listen but not interact. Are there any members of the public, Linda, who would like to speak?
There are no raised hands, Mayor.
Then we'll move on to item 7, the mayor's report. Winterfest was true holiday magic. Hundreds of children and adults enjoyed an afternoon and evening of fun. There were beautiful holiday lights, snowflakes in the air, food and drink, cookies, hot chocolate, hot toddies, even a food truck. There was live music, first the adorable Ross preschool students, followed by the Branson Girls a cappella group, then tailor-made ensembles played holiday classics throughout the evening. The weather was perfect. Huge thanks go to the Ross Auxiliary. They've been planning this event since last July. Dozens and dozens of volunteers helped make this event special, including the Ross Auxiliary co-presidents, Elena Batalla and Adrian Leggett, the event co-chairs, Jenna Greer and Erin Grace. The Ross Property Owners Association, they co-sponsored the holiday lights with Ross Auxiliary. The Ross Police Officers Association and family members, they donated and served cookies, donuts, cupcakes, cocoa, and they also helped set up and clean up. The Ross Valley Fire Department, they escorted Santa to the Common. The Ross Town staff, including Police Chief Pata, Recreation Manager Gretchen Kastetz, and Maintenance Supervisor Anthony Alcazar, And Anthony made sure that the power worked when there were some minor issues. Ross School 8th graders, joined by a few high school students, they helped during the event and during the morning after cleanup. The Auxiliary Philanthropy Committee, they raised almost $2,000 at the event for Adopt a Family to support local families in need. The Age Friendly Task Force, they are helping with the Letters to Santa program. That's the red mailbox marked North Pole in front of the post office. And the Marin Sanitary Service, they donated the garbage and recycling bins for this event. The Ross community has long enjoyed the annual tree lighting ceremony on the Common. This year, the Ross Auxiliary transformed the small ceremony to a full-fledged winter festival, which was enjoyed by hundreds of residents of all ages. It was a wonderful start to the holiday season. Item 8 is council committee and liaison reports. Are there any committee or liaison reports? Councilmember McMillan.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a couple really brief things. I finished my Stand Up for Racial Justice training a week ago, Monday. We had our Climate Action Committee MC meeting also last Monday. And a speaker, the chief executive from extrafood.org spoke for about a half an hour. It's a really worthwhile organization that provides meals to those who are hungry, at the same time saves greenhouse gases and waste going into landfills. And finally, Resilient Neighborhoods, the training that I took about, a year and a half ago now. Resilient Neighborhoods is having 2 more workshops starting in January, and I would encourage any of you who's interested in reducing your own greenhouse gas emissions to attend. You can sign up on resilientneighborhoods.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other reports? Then we'll move on to item
I'm
9,
sorry.
staff.
Sorry.
Sorry, Councilmember Breckus.
Beach, did you want to give an update on our fire as the vice president of that organization? I would cede to you if you wanted to take it.
Beach, you're muted.
Elizabeth and I attended the meeting last night of the Ross Valley Fire Department's Board of Directors. And the board worked on making the necessary changes to the document which describes, which creates and describes the Ross Valley Fire Department. That document will be in front of us and each of the other member entities governing boards next month with some proposed language to bring about the changes necessary for the closing of our fire department. So next month we'll work on it. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll move to item 9, staff and community reports, starting with the town manager, Krista.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I too would like to thank the Ross Auxiliary and the RPOA for their impressive efforts to plan and stage their Winterfest event last Friday. It was great. My husband and I really enjoyed attending the event, and we enjoyed the music and especially seeing all the kids frolicking in the snow, including some of our staff members' kids. So it was really an event that helped build community, and I think provided a really healthy measure of joy to the people that were there. So congratulations to those organizations. And then I'd also like to thank and recognize the support that was provided by town staff for the event. And much of it was provided before and after their usual workday. So I just wanted to recognize our town staff team for the work they did for the event as well. So it was great. And then lastly, I'm thankful to Patty Garbarino of Marine Sanitary Service for offering to donate the extra trash bins and recycling bins that were needed for the event. So we really appreciate their generosity in helping to defray the costs to the town and to those two organizations. So the town's recreation programs are really coming back strong. There's only a few spaces left in the winter camps offered, and registration for the January recreation programming has been very active. So it's good to see that coming back after in the end of the pandemic, hopeful end of the pandemic. The landscape contractor will start closing the field on the Ross Common starting on the 20th of December. And it will reopen the weekend before baseball season starts, which I believe is usually around mid-March. We'll have a more specific day in a little while. We're really thankful to the community for their patience, as this work is very much, this restoration work is very much needed. And we'll all be happy in the spring when it looks great for everybody. So, but thankful to the community for their patience. Storms are forecasted this weekend and into early next week. The impact in Marin County is forecast to start with light rain and showers later on Saturday, building to moderate rain and higher winds starting shortly before dawn on Sunday. Heaviest rainfall is likely on Sunday afternoon and into early Monday morning. The town is preparing, and you'll hear more about how the town prepares later on with Chief Pata's presentation about the October storm. But tomorrow we will be sending out an email to our town residents, alerting them to this forecasted storm and with reminders on how to prepare and phone numbers to call, check on if the power does go out, etc. And then as a reminder, the siren testing occurs at noon on the 2nd and 4th Friday of each month. So that means tomorrow. And then lastly, town hall offices will be closed starting December 24th, which is a Friday, through the end of that next week, December 31st. The closure does not apply to public safety services, and residents will also still be able to obtain encroachment permits by emailing public-works@townofross.org and they can obtain building inspections by appointment on December 28th and 30th. So there will be 2 days they'll be able to get building inspections that week. And that's it for my report. Thank you.
Thank you. 9B is Ross Property Owners Association. Is there a report from anyone from RPOA? I think it's Mark Fritz.
Okay, I'm bringing Mark Fritz in.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mark.
All right. Oop, there we go. Thank you. Thank you, Town Council, for hearing the update on the RPOA. Just a couple items to update you guys on this round. Little membership status update. We're around 300 members in 2021, which just surpasses the membership of 2020. Our dues and donations are about 25% greater than they were at the same time last year. So we're having about just a few more folks donate at a higher level, which is really nice. It enables us to do the great work that we're doing across the town. As far as project and events go, you mentioned the Winterfest a number of times. I don't think I need to repeat that, but it was a tremendous event. And we're really proud of the work that was done across the organizations from the RPOA and Ross Auxiliary. And in conjunction with that, we have received some really nice feedback on the lighting at the town common. Looks great, and those will stay lit until the early part of January. So we can all enjoy that over the festive holiday season. As part of our efforts to beautify the interior lobby of the post office space, we're going to be doing some painting in that space at the beginning of January. It's currently scheduled for January 10th. Many of you have noticed some of the artwork that we've hung in that space. We'll take that down. We'll paint that lobby and rehang that artwork, plus a few more pieces. So that, as I said, that should be early part of the January in the new year. As far as other projects, we are still working with the town on the porta potty enclosures, both at Natalie Coffin Green Park and Frederick Allen Park within town. So those should be constructed sometime in the early part of the next year. And we are working on our 2022 sort of roadmap of projects and events. So if anyone on the town council or within the town has any ideas, we're open to listening, and hopefully we'll be able to slot those ideas into our budget and the time frame. Last but not least, but just a big thanks for the town and Anthony specifically for all the work and the help that you all have provided for the RPOA over this past year. In 2021, it's been a good year for us. And I think the town is really improving across the board for some of the work we're doing. And that's it. That's the update.
Thank you very much. That takes us to item 10, the consent agenda. Are there any members of the council who would like to pull any items on the consent agenda off the consent agenda? Are there any members of the public who would like to pull any items on the consent agenda off the consent agenda? I don't see any raised hands.
No raised hands.
All right, then is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second,
Okay, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan?
aye.
And Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
And the consent calendar from A to G is adopted.
Thank you. Now we're at item 11, a public hearing, town council consideration of adoption of resolution 2228, establishing Marin sanitary service rates for 2022. Town Manager Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. The action before you this evening is to conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution establishing the maximum rates by Marin Sanitary Service for refuse and recyclable material collection and disposal to be effective January 1st, 2022. These services are provided pursuant to a franchise agreement between the town and Marin Sanitary Service. And that agreement outlines the services provided as well as a methodology to be followed to set the customer rates each year. I believe you're familiar with the jurisdictions in Marin that have similar agreements with Marin Sanitary Service. They worked together informally as part of a Marin franchisors group to share information and reduce costs. The group meets several times a year to oversee the operations and work together to conduct a single annual rate review analysis rather than each jurisdiction having to do their own, which is great. Marin Sanitary Service submitted their 2022 rate application using this agreed upon methodology that is in the franchise agreement. And this methodology has really assisted in stabilizing rate changes year to year. The franchisors group worked together. They hired a great consulting group called R3 to review the Marin Sanitary Services rate request. R3 found that their rate request of 0.74% for Ross rates to be appropriate under the methodology. This 0.74 rate adjustment will result in an increase of 32 cents per month for a residential 32-gallon cart. And so the monthly cost will now be $43.43. Recycling is included in all accounts, and customers can reduce their regular container size or pickup schedule, which results in lower rates. If they recycle more, their rates can go down. R3 did conduct a survey of Bay Area haulers as part of the rate review. And using this survey, the Ross proposed rate is lower than the Marin County average and very similar to the average for the whole Bay Area. So as in previous years, it's recommended that the rate adjustment be applied across the board to all residential, multifamily, and commercial service accounts. And then the actual rates for each of those categories is attached to the resolution that's before you this evening for adoption. Garth Schultz of R3 Consulting is on the call tonight, should you have some questions that are more technical in nature that I can't handle. And also Patty Garbarino, representing Marine Sanitary, is also on the call, should you have any questions for her. And it also looks from the attendee list that she might have some of her colleagues with you, but they aren't planning to give a presentation, just in case you have questions. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Krista about this item? Would anyone from, I know you said they're not planning on a presentation, but are there any comments from, let me ask if there are any comments from the members of the public. Do any of the members, does anyone in the public want to offer a comment or speak about this item?
There's no hands raised.
I'm not seeing any raised hands. And does anyone from Marin Sanitary Service want to make any comments before we bring it back to the council level? Then let's bring it back to the council. Any discussion? And if there's no discussion, is there a motion?
I move approval of the rates.
Ben, did I do something? Oh, okay. We're okay. Okay, is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second it.
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
And Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And thank you, Marin Sanitary. We've been lucky to have excellent service through the years with you. Thank you very much. That takes us to item number 12. Town Council consideration of introduction of ordinance 712, amending Ross Municipal Code, Chapter 8.04, Animal Control Law regarding dogs on the Ross Common. Patrick Streeter.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. The item before you is a proposed amendment to the Ross Municipal Code regarding dogs being leashed and unleashed on the Ross Common. So some background on dogs on the common. It's been a topic of discussion before this council several times over the years. There was a lot of discussion in 2004 when the council considered prohibiting dogs from being off leash anywhere on the common. The purposes of that, or the reason behind that discussion was related to hygiene and cleanliness, the comfort of everyone using the park, as well as the safety of children. As the council is aware, the Ross School is directly adjacent to the park. In a bit of a compromise, the council adopted ordinance number 585 in 2004, which sectioned off a portion of the park where dogs are not allowed leashed or off leash. That's the playing field section of the park. And the code remains silent on the Grove section of the park. In 2020, in response to COVID, the council decided to temporarily restrict public use of the Grove area on school days and to prohibit dogs at all times. This was to accommodate the Ross School and Ross Rec making use of that area for outdoor gathering of students and social distancing. This did take place throughout the 2020 and 2021 academic year. But following that time period, both Ross Rec and the school said that prohibition was no longer necessary. So in August of 2021, the council removed that restriction from the Grove area. And then discussed the issue of dogs off leash at the October 14th meeting on the suggestion of several council members. At that meeting, the public had been contacted prior to the meeting, various user groups of the park, and the general consensus was that people that like to run their dogs off leash were not comfortable being relegated to the area adjacent to the post office. They really needed the open space to run the dogs, but they'd be fine with restricting the hours that dogs are allowed off leash, so that students arriving from or departing from the Ross School are not competing with off-leash dogs in the park. So that was another compromise that the council was comfortable with. And so the council directed town staff to prepare an ordinance that would accomplish that compromise. The hours of arrival and departure from the school are a little complex. It changes on certain days of the week, also with different grade levels and different times of year. So staff's recommendation is to make the language so that it can be applied to an ever-changing schedule for the Ross School. So here's a quote from the proposed language that would be in this ordinance update. And the effective part is that 1/2 hour before and 1/2 hour after the opening of school entrances, and 1/2 hour before and 1/2 hour after student dismissal, dogs would not be allowed to be off leash in the Ross Common. And that's published at the beginning of every year in the Ross School Parent Handbook, which is available online. And we can make sure that it's available in public places in the town as well to begin the year. This project is not subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, both because it will not have an impact on the environment, and also general policy making does not meet the definition of project under CEQA. And so with that, the recommendation of staff is that the town council consider introducing and first reading of ordinance number 712, which would update the animal control law to prohibit dogs from being off leash during the times that children are arriving to or departing from the Ross School. And if there are any questions, I am available to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Are there any questions from council members for Patrick? Councilmember McMillan.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. I'm just wondering if we could put on our website a link to the Ross School handbook and maybe even to the Ross School hours for each day so people can go look at it. Because even though it says what the hours are in the handbook, I'm sure they change from day to day depending upon what's going on. Thanks.
I think that's a good suggestion. Yeah, we can also have somewhere on the town's website where we publish that information.
Councilmember Kircher.
Does the Ross School Parent Handbook, does it specify both the times when the entrances will be opened as well as the times where there's a student dismissal?
It does.
It wasn't clear. Okay, so somebody could just refer to that handbook and understand when their dogs can be off leash.
Mhm.
Okay.
Councilmember McMillan.
You know, I had another suggestion. Maybe it's too in your face, but I was thinking maybe we could have a little sign, of course, compliant with our sign ordinance, that says, you know, generally where you can get information about the hours so that as people are standing there, they could just use their phone to go check out to make sure they're not violating the half an hour before or half an hour after.
I think that's a good suggestion as well. And what we did when we initially had the prohibition on the common was we had a QR code on some sandwich board signs that you can just scan and get that information. So I think we can look to incorporate that.
Maybe we could put it on the dog waste thing, you know, the bag thing, put it there.
It's a good suggestion.
Patrick, I had a question. You know, sometimes before a town event, there'll be a sign, you know, that says, you know, no dogs because there's an event. Will we still be able to put up a sign that says something like, you know, no off leash dogs this week, upcoming town event? Does the town still have the ability to do that?
So actually putting an enforceable prohibition, I think would have to be an action by ordinance. We have to have that regulation somewhere. But we could put up advisory signs that say, please, no dogs off leash in anticipation of such event.
I mean, that's good enough.
I think that would be appropriate. And yeah, we'd just be limited in our enforcement abilities.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to let people know. I think that would be fine. Are there any other questions from members of the council? Would any members of the public like to comment on this item?
There are no raised hands, Mayor.
And we will bring it back to the council. Is there any discussion about this item? Is there a motion?
I will I'm tempted to make a motion and add that we not bring this topic up again while I'm on council, but I'll just put the resolution and move to adopt the resolution.
Second,
Second.
It's actually an ordinance, isn't it?
Sorry,
The introduction of an ordinance.
that's what I moved to do.
I'm sorry, who
That's
was,
what I seconded.
okay. All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
aye,
Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan? And Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. That takes us to item 13, town council consideration of the Roscommon Landscape Improvement Rehabilitation Plan, which includes repairs and improvements for the common. Patrick?
Okay, Mayor and council members, here's the next item. It is consideration of the final draft document for the Roscommon Landscape Improvement and Rehabilitation Plan. Over the past year or so, the town staff has been partnered with Gates and Associates, preparing this plan, which will both address immediate concerns for restoration of the common, but also anticipate future changes that might take place. Kind of create a roadmap for, as funding becomes available, how those improvements are applied. And to put this document together, an online questionnaire was given to the community that ran from late July into early August. We had a very good participation rate of that questionnaire. That and other outreach methods were brought forward in a report to the town council in August. And the initial concept was vetted past the council and the public at a hearing. Using that direction, the concept was revised and amended and brought in front of our advisory design review group to be further refined. That final product was brought in front of the council again in October, where the council provided final direction for how that plan should look. And the purpose of this evening is to review that final plan document, hopefully approve it, and then we will use that to apply for grant funding to make some of the immediate improvements to the park. Just to recap the community outreach, it was robust for this project. We created a project website. We held focus groups. We did the online questionnaire, as I had mentioned, and we leveraged the design resources and the public engagement resources that the town has to offer through public meetings. So some of the improvements that made it into the final plan, I'll just start by saying that the end result, the real message that we got was that the common is beloved the way it is, and there's not much that needs to be done. So most of these are kind of housekeeping tasks to just kind of bring it up to maintenance standards and efficiency. So all of the walking paths will be repaved. The pedestrian entrances to the park will be realigned to make more sense with street crossings. Trees will be planted so that as trees become succeeded out, new trees will take their place. The landscaping, which needs some work, will be refurbished and refreshed. We do have a long-term goal of replacing the turf. It's a major capital project, so we'll have to find funding for that and budget it, but it is in the plan. Adding a few seating options. One of the main comments that we received was that variety in seating options would be beneficial, especially for our age-friendly community members, to have different options for how they'd like to sit, you know, whether it be at a park bench or at a table with backs on the seats. And then there are other users who love the picnic tables that we have in the park as well. So just kind of that variety of seating options, while not substantially changing the feel of the park. Revisiting the utilities, so the trash receptacles, the mailbox, things like that. And then lastly, the utilities section in the, I guess it would be the western portion of the park, making sure that is adequately screened and using vegetation and landscaping to do that in a thoughtful manner. So the council's had a chance to review this document. We have received some grammatical corrections and some clerical corrections, as well as some minor comments on the content. those will be incorporated into the final document before it's published. But now is the opportunity for the council to just give their feedback on the process and on the plan. And so staff is looking to hear those comments and whether or not the council approves of that plan document. And staff is available for comments. Also, representatives from Gates and Associates, who's partnered with the town on producing this document, are available if there are any questions that would be better answered by them. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you very much. Let's start with questions for Patrick. Councilmember Breckus.
The screening of utilities and storage, that's right near the playground, right?
That's correct. So right now there's a cyclone fence. Our public works team recently installed some green screening in the fence, but this plan would call for a more long-term aesthetically pleasing solution.
And sometimes I've seen, but it's been a while, so I'm not sure if this is still happening, like soccer equipment over there. Is that also part of that plan, or is the soccer equipment being stored somewhere else at this time?
I don't have an answer for you. We would work with Ross Rec and with the school to figure out whose equipment that is. And the idea of screening things that aren't part of the natural aesthetic of the park, I think would apply to that type of equipment too. So we would take that into consideration.
Okay, that would be great. I don't know if it's the same issue that we've had it before. They've changed to where they're doing it, but it used to be right to the side of that storage equipment and was there half the year. So that might be nice if that's possible. I know it's dark back there, so maybe it's not, but just a thought.
Are there other questions for Patrick? Councilmember Kircher and then Councilmember McMillan.
Yes, I had a question about the trash receptacles. There's a reference in the plan to the trash receptacles that I think are in the corner there of Redwood and Roscommon. But were there any plans to do something about some of the other trash receptacles? I think there are other locations. I can't remember how many where there are trash receptacles, and I can't recall whether we discussed trying to improve those trash receptacles or screen them in some way.
Yeah, the specific discussion was we're on the ones right near the bleachers for the ball field, but all of the trash receptacles were part of the discussion, and the consensus was they need to be uniform and practical. And so we will be looking at the trash receptacles throughout the entire park and making sure that they meet those needs.
Sort of below the line, but can council members also look at them and weigh in? I mean, I'm sure everyone has an opinion.
Yeah, I don't think that would go up to the level of being incorporated into the plan, but it would be Public Works. I think that would be in charge of that if we were to do an overhaul, and we could certainly get council feedback on that.
Okay.
In the past, they brought a lot of that stuff to ADR. It was just like standard thing they would bring to ADR.
Uh-huh.
And so rather than agendizing it and having it a full scale council meeting, that always has been a good group to bounce the aesthetics off of. So I don't mind if you want to look at it, Elizabeth, but I would be fine with ADR looking at it for me.
It's such a small part, but it's so important to so many people where they are and what they look like. So yeah, ADR is a great suggestion. Julie, did you have a question or comment, or questions now? We'll discuss later.
Well, I'm just wondering if existing benches, some of them have memorial plaques on them. And I just want to be sensitive. If we're replacing any of those, we need to be careful to notify whoever donated that and have a similar plaque on the replacement. And I think in one area of the report, it said that we will be using wooden benches. And it seems like wooden benches don't last nearly as long as metal benches. I know aesthetically they might be a little more nice and in keeping with the rustic feel of the common, but I'm just wondering for how long they last, we might be better served by going with metal.
Maybe we can discuss that when we come after the comments from members of the public. I could certainly offer some thoughts about all of these items. I have a few questions, Patrick. It has to do with like where and when is it possible? Is it possible that there will be little tweaks to this program? So for example, when I was looking at the pathway plan on page 47, and then looking at the pathways themselves out at Ross School, at the Common, some of the replacement paths are really wider than what's there now. And I kind of think people want mostly replacement, evenly. And I guess one in particular is the plan here shows what they're calling the Ross School path to be 8 feet wide. And that 8-foot wide path goes almost all the way to the edge of the Common from Ross School. And right now there's just a small part that's 8 feet wide, but the whole thing isn't 8 feet wide. And I know people kind of like the grassy field with smallish paths. And I don't know that we want big wide paths. So my question is there room for, tweaking the width of the paths, and when would that be?
Yeah, so the plan was not to expand any of the paths, to keep them generally the same size, but consistent. But before any work is actually done, the project would go out to bid. We'd have design drawings, and those would have to be approved by the council before we actually begin the project.
Okay.
So that detailed level would have a chance to be reviewed by the council.
Okay.
Not part of this plan.
And then we didn't include any benches by that 8-foot path by where parents drop off and pick up their children. But it might be really nice to add 2 benches right, near the school, near that wide path. And I mean, I don't know if this is the time to, to add things and discuss, but it's just on the topic of benches. It just seems like the ideal place to have a bench, because you see parents standing around, with other kids for long periods of time, and it might be nice. The other bench comment I had was, we have 2 existing benches on that path that cuts a triangle through the grove, and they're kind of old and ugly, but they're not slated to be replaced in this plan. And so again, at the level of bringing back the exact plans, is that where these things might be added or changed?
Yeah, so right now the direction we received was not to change or replace any of the existing furniture, and to be pretty modest with the additions. And the direction was to focus the seating down towards where the nexus of the paths are, kind of by the post office crossing. It is a minimalist approach. And so there will be opportunities if it looks like there's a need for more seating or for alternative seating. That's always something that we can amend the plan. This is a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
And it's a guidance document, but we can always amend it to meet the actual needs of the users of the park.
Okay.
So there will be plenty of opportunities, both when design drawings come forward, and then just reflecting on how the park has been developed and maintained over time. We can always update and amend it.
And then the screening area that Councilmember Breckus was talking about, that has that silver cyclone fence now. Is there an option of replacing that with a black cyclone fence, which looks prettier, or is that not part of these plans?
I think the plans were to, again, look at the details at the time that we do the work.
Okay.
But we were going to be landscape focused as opposed to metal fences.
Okay. Councilmember Cool. Thank you.
Patrick, towards the end of the long report that we got is a section regarding implementation. And if I read it correctly, well, I guess my question is if we adopt it, is that the order in which these events are going to occur?
That is the proposed order in which the events will occur. As the staff report points out, we have $400,000 budgeted for this fiscal year for implementing those improvements. So part of the exercise was prioritizing the work that should take place. So that's that's the recommended order of work. Again, the council will be the ultimate authority on how we spend our budget and how we implement the plan. So it doesn't have to be set in stone with adoption of this plan.
When would the implementation begin?
We are applying for grant funding before the end of this calendar year. So we'd envision the first phase would go out to bid in the spring.
Well, my particular concern is when the hedge is going to be put in. When are we going to take some cognizance of the fact that we have a drought currently as far as scheduling replacement of the hedge?
Yeah, that was part of the previous council discussions. And while we acknowledge that the hedge needs to be replaced, we were going to make sure to time that for at a time when it would not interfere, not be in conflict with water saving that was going on.
Thank you.
On that topic, Patrick, it looked to me from reading it that also means that the connection from the crosswalk at the post office into the common, that doesn't happen until the drought is over, because we were going to be taking out that hedge and planting new hedges. Is that correct? So part of the hedge project is extending the sidewalk into the common. Is that correct?
Well, the sidewalk realignment would be part of the repaving of the asphalt, which is a top priority project. So
Okay.
we may do spot replacement just to accommodate that.
Okay.
If it doesn't line up with the timing for the overall replacement of the hedge.
I mean, I think that would be ideal I mean, most of that's just getting rid of a hedge with probably minimal planting, but it would be a shame to not do that alignment when we're doing the other paths all at the same time. Okay, that's
That
great.
is the top priority item is refurbishing those paths. So
Great, thanks. Other questions? Beach, your hand is still raised. Do you have another question? Okay, any other council member questions? Then let's see if any members of the public would like to comment on this item. I am not seeing any raised hands.
That's correct. No raised hands, Mayor.
So let's go back to the council. You know, Patrick, I think this is going to be, Patrick and the consultants, I think this will look really lovely. We have some really nice improvements. The pathways will look nice. I think the alignment with the crosswalk will look beautiful. Opening up the post office lawn with a bench there, maybe not a trash can, but a bench, I mean, that's going to look really lovely. And I think that area will be used. So, you know, thank you to everyone for getting it this far. I think I think the town's going to be delighted with the maintenance and then the modest improvements. So thank you, everyone. Any comments, or sorry, any discussion? And if not, a motion.
Sorry, it seemed like we didn't, it seemed like it was just consideration. So I wasn't sure that we needed to give that. But I thought, getting back to Julie's point, I understand that we probably replace wood more often than metal, but I'm a little not quite a big fan of the metal just because it's hard and uncomfortable and it isn't as attractive. So I hate to rain on that idea. I agree with the concern, but I think that maybe it's worth the extra money to have a wooden bench.
if I can just chime in, the direction we received from the council at the October meeting was to use teak benches like in similar to what's already there. So that's what's in the plan. And again, when we get down to the details of design drawings, if the council wants to take a different direction, we can do that.
Okay.
You know, I bet we could find metal benches that are equally attractive or even more attractive than wood benches, and we wouldn't have to replace them because they won't wear out or get splinters in your seat. But you know, when that time comes, I'd be up for hearing more information about those options.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think the community is expecting, you know, what is, which is wood. I mean, but when we get there, we can talk about it more. But anyway, in any case, Patrick, you're saying at the moment, the plan says teak because that's what we discussed before. Is that right? there is one metal bench. We'll have to decide if that stays metal or that gets replaced with teak or how we change it out. But, okay, so that's a discussion for a little later. Any other discussion points that council members would like to make? Then, Patrick, do we need a motion to approve this?
Yes, so there's no resolution associated with, but if we could have a motion for the council to accept the plan and then a vote.
Okay, is there such a motion?
I will move that we accept the plan.
Second,
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool?
aye.
Councilmember McMillan?
I,
And Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you everyone for your work on this. That takes us to item 14, Town Council consideration of introduction of ordinance number 713, an ordinance of the Town of Ross amending Ross Municipal Code Chapter 18.52, non-conforming structures and uses. Patrick, again.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, and I appreciate you not getting too bored with my presentation one after another. We are now, and just on the previous project, I just wanted to thank this council for the amount of work that you put into this, giving a lot of thoughtful comments and feedback as we refine that plan. So I'm very happy that we were able to accept the final plan, and I look forward to implementing it. So moving on to the next item, this is our minor nonconformity permit. This is an ordinance that would amend a pilot program that we currently have in place. So just a little bit of history on the zoning ordinance in the town of Ross. Our first comprehensive ordinance was in 1961. We do update it from time to time as the various needs of the community are addressed and met. We do that through the zoning code. In 2018, the council listed a series of recommendations that they wanted staff to look more closely at. And one of those was a program for a minor nonconformity permit. Currently, most of the properties in Ross are nonconforming in some way. It's very conservative development standards. And the traditional remedy for that would be a variance, which has very specific findings and needs to go in front of the council. So we have a nonconformity permit, which allows for a nonconforming structure to be modified or replaced, as long as the degree of nonconformity is not increased. But that still required a public hearing before the council, design review in front of the ADR group, a substantial amount of time and money for the applicant, even for something as small as moving a door or window or changing the material that a deck is made of. So the council asked us to put together a pilot program for these minor small projects to be addressed at the staff level. So the non-conforming structures and uses section was added to the code. This is basically the provisions that it allows. Applicability in the current minor nonconformity permit process was that there's no change to the floor area. Staff is recommending that we make the minor change of changing that from no change to no increase in floor area. If somebody, for instance, has a non-conforming deck that they'd like to make smaller, we think that can be handled at the staff level without having to go in front of the council. Everything else will remain the same as the program that we've had in place for the last year. The structure is not readily visible from the public way or adjacent properties, or if it is, the town planner determines that the visual impact is minor. That was a provision that was added by the council in consideration of first implementing this type of permit. Before a decision is made, notice is sent to all property owners that are adjacent to the non-conforming structure. And the decision is made by the town planner. It's an administrative decision, but a public hearing will be held if one is requested. That decision can be appealed by the applicant or by neighbors up to the town council. And if a project qualifies for a minor nonconformity permit, but planning staff feels that it should be elevated to the council level, we reserve that right as well. And then the change here, aside from changing the word change to increase, would be to eliminate the provision that the program expires after 1 year. In the year that we've had this in place, we've had 14 applications for minor nonconformity permits. They've all received approval. The types of permits that we see are things like, as I mentioned, relocating windows, altering decks, or making small changes to structures that might be in the setback, a garage or a portion of the house. The neighbors are notified of the projects, as I mentioned, and they're allowed to, they're given the opportunity to make comments, and then staff can incorporate any of those considerations working with the applicant. We did have one public hearing that was requested, and we have had no appeals on any of the decisions on these minor nonconformity permits. This change has been reviewed for compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. The code change itself is not subject to CEQA, and most of the projects that are affected by this language in the code typically qualify for a categorical exemption as well. So it's the recommendation of staff that the council introduce and have a first reading for ordinance number 713, which would amend the Ross Municipal Code to make permanent the minor nonconformity permit program. And that concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any questions for Patrick from members of the council? Councilmember McMillan.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm just wondering on the notice to adjacent neighbors, should there also be notice to neighbors who live across the street if they're able to see whatever's going on?
We include the street center line as an adjacency, so they are already noticed as part of this.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Linda, are there any members of the public who would like to comment about this item?
I do not see any raised hands, Mayor.
Nor do I. Then let's bring it back to the council. Any discussion of this item? I don't think we need a motion. Is that right, Patrick? This is just an introduction and a public hearing?
Need
You
a
need to-
motion to introduce
Yes, you need
this.
to vote on this.
Oh, we need to vote it? Oh, sorry. Then is there a motion to approve ordinance number 713?
So moved.
Second,
All right, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
aye.
Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool?
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan?
Aye.
And Mayor Robbins?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item 15, Town Council and Staff Discussion of the October 24th storm event. Police Chief Pata and Rich Simonich. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robbins, Town Council, and Town Manager Johnson. I appreciate the opportunity to bring this. I have a small PowerPoint I'm going to bring before you, and goes along with the staff report that I believe that you have regarding the October 24th storm. So while it certainly is not my first storm in my public safety career, it was my first storm in the town of Ross, and it was pretty significant. It was it was good for me to experience this, and I had a lot of help that day and in the days leading up to it. And so I wanted to share some of that with you. And I have a PowerPoint. I'll start here right now. And let me get this going. Here we go. So one of the things that became very apparent was that as the 24th progressed, the morning progressed into the afternoon, and we had some pretty significant rains coming. The storm revealed some weaknesses in our systems, but I think more importantly, it also illuminated some real human strengths within our town staff and within our community. So that was good for me to experience. It was a confidence builder, really, in the kind of teamwork that we have in Ross. So we knew that the storm was coming. We certainly, everybody was talking about the storm and what it would do and how it would impact the Coromandel Creek. for the most part, without really, to almost everybody I spoke to, nobody was super concerned about the impact to the creek because of the drought, and it had been so dry that the general consensus was that yes, we were going to get hit with this storm, but it would be manageable. As it turns out, at the end of this, the creek did not breach, and did not the flooding that we did have in town wasn't really as a result of the creek at all, but more of a lot of the debris that fell from the trees and that landed in the culverts. Before the storm happened, there was some preparation that took place. Most of it happened with the public works director and his staff going and cleaning out culverts and making sure that that everything was clear for the most part. He also, Mr. Simonich, also prepared some emails to go out to our residents to give them some guidance on some things that were probably smart to do prior to the storm, just to kind of help us manage this when it was to occur. So that really started weeks before this storm that happened on the 24th. What we did at the police department is we really monitored the weather as it was coming in. One of the things I did was I made sure that we had our generator to the rear of the police station serviced prior to the storm. We had a company come in and make sure that everything was working. We actually found that there were some small repairs that needed to happen to the generator, and I'm grateful that they were able to accommodate us and come in and to take care of that. Our team members at the Department of Public Works topped off the gas tank in the generator, and we thought we were ready to go. Again, prior to the storm, there was a lot of collaboration with our town clerk, Linda Lopez, and Rich from the Public Works Department, and myself as to messaging. The messaging turned out to be, I believe, turned out to be really important for our community. That messaging went out. There was a couple emails that went out on the week of the 19th, and then the actual day of the storm, when we learned of its true potential, we followed up with 2 more emails to our town. There's a couple examples of the emails that did go out, and with some resources attached to the bottom of the email on where to get more information and things, and where to go to find out more on the storm itself and what the impact was to the creek. So on the day of the storm, as luck would have it, I was the acting town manager as well as the police chief, and it wasn't like a big sleep night for me, because I was really concerned about making sure that we did the best job that we could. So that night, starting around 1 o'clock in the morning, every 2 hours, I would check in with my staff. I would make sure that the officer that was on duty was actually driving through town, looking for those areas that could be problematic for us. I was checking the rain gauge, which is pretty accurate, actually. I was surprised how accurate it was. Checking on the rain gauge to see exactly where the creek was and what kind of trouble we might be in. Right around 8 o'clock in the morning, my officers and some folks from town called to notify us of some localized flooding that was happening in town. That flooding was happening actually on the west side of Sir Francis Drake, starting in the area of El Camino Bueno Bridge in the Wellington area. What I noticed when I drove into town, because I came in that day, was that the branches and leaves that were not there on Friday were now there in the culverts and in some of the drainage areas. A lot of it looked like old wood that had come out from the heavy winds that happened as part of this storm system moved through. So all of the leaves that were stuck in the trees and those old branches had been blown out, and a lot of them were on the street. Thankfully, Anthony and Zach came in off duty on their day off and responded into town, and were able to get there and remove much of that. as the storm progressed, what we found was that that localized flooding was really hampered, or well, what contributed to it really was the huge amount of rain that was making its way into the drainage, and it was just not able to get out to the creek and away from the street. So it did cause us some problems. Having said that, we did not have to close any of our streets. We did well on Drake as a result of that. So right around 10 o'clock ish, a little bit before then, I drove into town. I was on the phone with Richard Simonich from Public Works, and we were talking about how we were going to address today and what different needs we might have. He was super cooperative and just pretty much anything I needed, I could have, which was great. And that's what led to Anthony and Zach coming in to help us out. When I got to the station, it became really clear that we were going to need additional people to handle calls for service. We had over, I believe it was over 20 calls for service in a short period of time. And what was important, the takeaway that was important for me was that we were not able to do that with the staffing that we had. We had one officer on duty that day. Thankfully, it was the former chief of police, so he was there to give me a hand. And but he was getting really wet, and there was a lot of stuff that we had to do that day. So I called in an officer who was home, and the three of us went out and started working in town. And some of the things we had to do was deal with some down trees. We had a tree come down on Chestnut, and then we had another tree which caused us huge problems at around 1 PM. A private property tree came down across Lagunitas Road, and that is what was the beginning of what started a lot of things happening in town. Most importantly was that it took down the power lines. So while that was bad, the good part of it was the generators kicked on at Town Hall. So while our community was left without power, our emergency services was able to function still. Sorry about that. Let me keep going here. There is the tree that came down. So normally what we would do, and this happens in pretty much every community, is the first call is to our friends at the fire department to come and help us out. They have a lot of equipment to help remove trees, but not a tree that size. So thankfully, there's relationships that were already established before I came into town with our public works director and a tree service. So phone calls were made to get that tree out of there. And it took a little bit of time, and we had to block the street because those power lines that you see there were live. And oddly enough, we had, and this happens all the time, we had people that kind of wanted to come down and check that out, which created a safety hazard for us. So we had to be there. So us being there took us away from some of the other things that we had to do in town, but it was necessary that we did that. And that's why the relationships that we have with the tree people is so important, to get them there as quickly as possible to make that road passable. PG&E was also notified, the cable company and AT&T, well, actually AT&T I believe is underground, but the cable company was called, and all of them came out, not quickly, because the problems that we were having in town, everybody else was having in the county. So from 1 o'clock until 4 o'clock, on and off, while in and out of my patrol car and working some of the like security stuff regarding the tree and other calls that we had, I was on Zoom calls and phone calls with the Emergency Operations Center at the county, which had been activated, and to a smaller group in the Ross Valley working with Chief Weber at the fire department. One of the things that I learned is that there's a pact between Fairfax, the town of Ross, and Central Marin, that when in the San Anselmo area, that when one siren goes off, all sirens go off. And that's always, I was told that that's always been that way. So it was a leadership decision on when we would activate that siren. And the trigger usually is at flood stage or just before it. But that flood stage is different from town to town. Fairfax usually goes first, and then San Anselmo, and then the town of Ross. So Fairfax had hit the flood stage, and while we had not yet, it was still determined that we needed to activate our alarm as per part of this agreement that we have. So we all went about our business of setting off the alarm. So we have two ways to set off the alarm in our town. One is it's a pager service that you call up and it will set the alarm off, which is what I did. And to my surprise, the alarm did not go off. So then the next thing that we did is we actually went to the siren itself, which is located by the Public Works building, and manually hit the button to set the alarm off. And again, to our surprise, found that it was not functioning. So the team at the Public Works Department immediately jumped into action and got a generator out to it to hook it up to the battery backup that was in place for it. And try as they might, it would not go off. So at that moment, I was on the phone with Mr. Semenich with the Public Works and Ms. Lopez from the town clerk, and we decided to send out a townwide email letting people know that that while it had not flooded yet, it was imminent. We believed it was going to flood and that people needed to be aware of that. So we sent an email out. I contacted the person that runs our social media. We posted on our social media that the siren was not functioning and that we believed that the creek was imminently going to flood and that people needed to take action to evacuate. And then the next thing that we did was started going door to door and making notification of people that live near the creek that they should evacuate. So myself, the off-duty officer, the former chief, and then our friends, partners with Public Works started going to, I think we probably knocked on almost 20 doors, both on Drake and on, I believe it's I always get this street. It's not Shady, it's Shanley, I believe.
Sylvan Lane.
Sylvan, see, I get it messed up. So we went and started making notifications. To our delight, we found that I want to say that like 90% of the people had already left. And I don't know if that's because they lived through other storms and you know what to look out for, if it was some of our messaging, but I was grateful that they weren't there. Thankfully, the creek never did actually flood or go over the banks, but it was good to know that people were really on top of it. Here's a shot of right behind the police station. And that's about a foot from breaching. So one of the things that we did, like not that night, we finally were able to, the storm did calm down, the waters did start to recede. So not that night, but the following day, we began looking into what worked and what didn't work, and which leads us to the lessons learned here. So the power outage was caused by the tree that went over on Lagunitas Road. What I didn't know is that the generator at the police department was not connected to the siren. I did know that we had a siren. I was told about it when I came here in April, but nobody really knew exactly who was most responsible for testing the siren, because it had been done traditionally by fire, and then it was done by Chief Masterson, and then even the town manager, actually, Joe Chin, was involved in activating it from time to time. While I was looking around, I couldn't find any logs or anything that looked like it was a routine or a regular thing. So we have one now. We've implemented that now. But, and maybe Rich can speak more to this, but my understanding is in 2020, when they tried to enhance the power system for Town Hall in that area, there was it was a huge cost to upgrade or to make that power system work with the siren that we have. A decision was made that we would put the battery back up there, and that battery was installed, and it didn't work. So I know that following day that Public Works got on replacing the battery system and trying to create a better system that would work, so that we wouldn't have this problem again. That is the day of the flooding, and what you see on the photograph is the generator and the efforts from our Public Works crew to try to get that to work. I also have to thank and mention the fire department sent representatives, because they were quite familiar with it, to try to help us figure out how to get this thing to work, and it didn't. So again, when I looked at this, I was trying to figure out, well, how do we make this so this doesn't happen again, and kind of what happened. And so really a couple different things came out of my review of this. And one was there was really no official person that was responsible for setting off this alarm. So Mr. Simonitch and I came to the agreement that we would both share the responsibility of maintenance of this and setting the alarm off, and that we would cross-train our staff so that if I wasn't there, I wasn't the only person that knew how to do this, so that others would be able to do this and pull it off. The siren was actually functional in 2 days past the storm. We now have a regular testing protocol in place. I have actually entered into our records management system. For lack of better words, it's an alarm, like a notification alarm, essentially, that every second and fourth Friday of the month, we're to test the system, both with power on and with power off, so that we can test the battery backup to make sure that it is actually functioning. Some of the, I heard a lot of talk about kind of how this kind of maybe fell apart. Some of it was that we had such a drought that there was no need to test the flood siren. I've heard a lot of talk, but nobody really knows for sure. So feel comfortable knowing that Mr. Simonitch and myself have taken over this, and that we'll be responsible for it from this day forward. So that's basically it. The cross training is super important. Logging of this will be important so that we have some accountability. And there you have the siren today. It is I'm told, a World War II era siren. It has one speed, and it winds up and goes, and it takes a little bit of time to wind up, and it takes a little bit of time for it to stop. So while we'll be testing it on Fridays at noon, for 5 seconds, it might go a little longer because it takes a little while to calm down. And here's kind of my final observations of this, and I'd love to hear your input on this and your thoughts, is really the collaboration with the Department of Public Works, with the town clerk and police really did work. Everybody was communicating, even though we had all this storm stuff going on. We were able to talk to each other with our cell phones. There's a story that one of the emails that went out from our clerk, she lost power and actually was able to get the help of another person that works in town to help send out the emails. So we had this great chain of people working with each other to make this work. Also, I have to mention that some of you at Town Council volunteered to come in and help us out. I greatly appreciate it. I would not have wanted you to get stuck in that, but I was grateful for the phone call, especially seeing this was my first storm in town, and I appreciate it. Thank you. What's clear is the strong relationships that we have with Central Marin, with Ross Valley Fire, the Water District, and then of course all of our local town folks that work with us is very strong. This storm wasn't just our storm, it was everybody else's as well. And we all had similar challenges, and everybody did pull it off pretty well. An important lesson for me was that we need to call people in. When something like this happens, we just have to call our our staff in on something like this because again, I would not have been able to get somebody from the sheriff or Central Marin to help out because they had their own problems. And so we needed to bring people in. The other great takeaway was that the residents near the creek are on the ball. They are aware of the hazards of living there, and they did a great job of. It was super helpful for us that they had left despite the siren not working. And then I guess lastly for me is that that we can't. I don't think we should rely just on one thing. While the siren is great and it is a huge help, people can hear it. We have to look for other sources of information to help us out. Alert Marin is a great resource. We have social media. Our email is a great resource. And then certainly making the phone call. While I may not be in the station or none of my officers will be in the station, somebody will be on the other end of the phone, whether it be 911 or the non-emergency line, to talk people through whatever challenges that they may have. And that's the end of the PowerPoint. I'm not sure if Mr. Simonitch has something else to add.
No, I'll wait. And if you have any questions, we're here to answer anything you might have. And thanks, Chief, for that presentation. And we'll give it back to council.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Chief Potter, and Rich for getting us through that day, through that very wet day. Are there questions? I see almost everyone has a question. So let's start with Councilmember Breckus, then McMillan, then Kircher.
Yeah, Chief Potter, thank you so much for doing a great job. I'm sure it must have been nerve-wracking to go through this first event in town, and how you did a great job, and how great that Eric was able to step up. And, you know, I know, especially having grown up in this town, it's really, you know, we have, when the flooding happens, it happens. And, you know, everybody's willing to pitch in. So for sure, if you ever have, it would be helpful to have another person in, by all means, reach out to the council, because I think there's a long tradition of doing that, and nobody would, you know, hesitate to say yes to that if they can. So, you know, I had two thoughts that occurred to me after that event. One was my niece, who lives in town, in the downtown, took a picture of the tree down. And at some point I had to go somewhere. So it was soon after that. So I drove by to take a look at it. And it looked like the tree was down. I could see the wires down, but I actually didn't see, and maybe I missed it. Maybe they were, you know, behind the tree or something, but I didn't actually see anybody around there. And I was kind of concerned about that, because I was worried that maybe, you know, we didn't have, well, I mean, if I assume the wires are live, but I don't know if everybody assumes that. And so that was my concern.
Yeah, it you know, it took a few moments for us to get A-frames up. We actually ran out of staffing to sit on both sides of it. So we did have somebody on one side of it. At one point we had myself and former Chief Masterson on the other side of it. And then one or the other of us had to leave to go handle another call that was happening regarding another tree or flooding. So yeah, staffing is an issue. And I think there's some opportunities for us to look into finding other people who can come in to help us. And I think it's a good conversation to have. I know that right now I'm speaking with Gil Fleetus and Ross Reddy, and we're having conversations about how to minimize these things in the future. But you're absolutely right. It is important. We hope that people would obey the signs. It does take a few moments, probably more than a few minutes, to get some of the signage up, to warn people to not walk there. But, you know, people are people, and they do want to look. So yeah, it is an issue. It's not just an issue in this town. I've seen it in my last couple jobs. So yeah, it is something.
I wonder if, you know, we shouldn't have, you know, just like we have those public works A-frames that say various things, if we shouldn't have some that say hazard or something that you guys can drive around, and if you need to drop them, do that, and or whether we should consider having a contract with tree companies to have them prioritize the town in emergencies so that, you know, we get their first effort. Because even if you could, you know, have tree companies come out and at your beck and call and then go elsewhere, that would be, you know, relieve you folks. And so that was one question. The other is, you know, I'm on the creek and my property is not historically flooded. It kind of does because I'm on the creek. So it's like, you know, creek is flooding, but it doesn't come onto my property. And I was wondering about the messaging that went out, because it basically was kind of a one size fits all. If you live near the creek, go for higher ground. And, you know, we have creeks crisscrossing our town. It didn't even differentiate between some of the creeks and other creeks. And so I also just wondered about that. I couldn't really think of another, you know, incident where we had that kind of a messaging, but maybe I'm wrong, but I was wondering if it shouldn't be a little more nuanced. I mean, you know, some properties along the creek flood, you know, maybe the message should say, you know, you need to watch your creek. And, you know, some of the creeks in town, or particularly this creek, will flood or what, but it seems so, you know, alarmist for my situation, because I'm on the major creek that does flood, but my property doesn't. But I was kind of like, gosh, do they know something I don't know? But I've lived on this creek for 20 plus years and it seems like I'm good. So, I mean, I'm not sure who had to go to higher ground, you know, and who didn't, but I'm thinking that it must have messaged a lot of people who didn't. And, you know, rather be alarmist, I guess, than not. But, you know, at the same time, you know, maybe you could ask, like, what is our history and messaging about the creek? And should we be focused on the Corte Madera Creek versus all our other creeks? And, you know, should it, instead of just saying go to higher ground, should it say something like, you know, keep an eye on your creek? Or I don't know. I mean, I thought that just might be a good discussion.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good discussion. Rich, I think we should get together maybe next week and talk about those things.
Right. Yeah, regarding the tree company, so we do historically have the tree man who's we have a tree come down practically every year with the storms, and he is kind of on, as you said it, our beck and call. He's responds. His company responds within a few hours, which is actually pretty good when you have a storm situation like that. So there is an opportunity to set up some sort of master services agreement with them. It's usually what happens in an emergency. They'll come out, they'll do the work, and they'll invoice us afterwards. So we're working on getting those companies more on a formal agreement status for these type of incidents. And then Elizabeth, regarding your comments on the creek, so the Corte Madera Creek, of course, is the main floodway through the town, and then as it rises, all the other creeks will rise with it because they can't drain as the creek gets higher. So, and you also, regarding your property, well, you never know whether a tree is going to be coming down and run into your house as well, you know, or come up onto your backyard. There's so many events that could happen that I agree, a message should go out to watch the creek, but I think everybody in the town, in the valley, needs to be aware that something could happen. And so a more generalized response that we do have, I think, is the way to go. Otherwise, it could get a little bit convoluted. So the message is, yeah, it's going to flood. Corte Madera Creek's going to start flooding and back into the other creeks, and it's time to look out and listen for the alarms. So.
Thank you,
And
Councilmember.
just a lot of those, the messaging that was going out that day was happening from the inside of a soaking wet police car, trying to type and make sure that we get the message out. So it was hectic, but I think there's some things that we can do to make some improvements, and I appreciate the comment.
Councilmember McMillan.
Yes, Chief Pada, I wanted to echo what Councilmember Brecka said. We really appreciate how calm and how you were solving problems nonstop, novel problems, the first ones for you on the job. So that was a tough situation, and I think you handled it really well. You should not hesitate to call on us to come down and help you. We're willing to do that. We've done that before in prior floods with Ross School. And we're more than willing to help. And it's better for us to help than sit at home wringing our hands, wondering what's going on. Your communications that day were very helpful to keep us apprised of how things were going. So that was really good. I'm wondering about the siren. It's also used for fire and earthquake too, right? So it's not just a flood siren.
So that's a good question. So when I came in, it was told to me that that's the flood siren. And then what has happened also in the last couple of terrible fires in Sonoma County and here in the state, they've adopted the high-low siren notification from the police cars. So that's another thing we're going to have to work out as to, do we want one siren that for everything, or do we want to go with kind of what the state is doing for fires and then have the flood siren be the flood siren? So that's a conversation that we have to have and figure out, how we want to go. The upside of doing the high-low siren is that we have them available to us. They're in the cars. The downside is that they don't have the same impact as a loud siren. So we would have to drive pretty much all over town for that. So it's definitely worth looking into, and yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay. And also, I believe in some of your communications to us, you were mentioning that the inside of the police building and the inside of the fire building and the communications, they were all leaking. Is that right?
So we had some leaking from the roof. It wasn't from a clog because the drain was working. The director of public works has looked into it, and they're trying to, I think they had somebody come over actually to look at fixing it. Thankfully, nothing, all of the electrical stuff is high enough off the ground that it wasn't impacted, but certainly it's unnerving to have water coming in. And I think it's just the building is just very old.
Yeah. No, it's just further evidence of why we need to rehabilitate those facilities. My other question was the emails that were going out to all the residents. I'm not sure they're going out to all the residents because I'm not sure how many people have signed up for the email system. And I'm also not sure how many people have signed up for Alert Marin, which is what the fire department would use if there was a huge wildfire or a fire caused by earthquake.
Right.
And I'm wondering if we should take this opportunity to have like a postcard campaign, or I would be happy to sit at the post office with a card table and distribute information, try to get more residents' email contacts, and also especially get people to sign up for Alert Marin, because that's really the way that we're going to get notified when there's a big disaster.
Yeah, I like that idea of the postcard. I think that's a good idea.
I think Linda wants to tell us how many residents are
Yes.
signed up.
So we actually have more residents signed up than we've ever had. We have 1,260 approximately, and it's grown quite large due to COVID. As soon as the pandemic happened, lots and lots of people signed up.
Can we correlate that to each house? Could we figure out which houses have not signed up and I can go knock on their door?
No, unfortunately, I have names and address, email addresses.
Okay, and I've asked the county people if there's any way to figure out how many people from Ross are signed up to Alert Marin, and there's really they haven't quite figured that out yet.
Mm.
But that's the other, I think that is probably more important than signing up for the Ross email system. So for consideration, maybe a postcard drive, or I'll sit at the post office. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
maybe we could maybe we could put some around.
Are people hearing Councilmember Breckus?
Maybe with
Elizabeth,
our
it's
sign,
your-
see to
you're
try and get
frozen.
some. Thank you. I think
Let's-
I'm having problems.
Let's move on to Councilmember Kircher, and then Elizabeth, in a minute, we'll come back to you. Councilmember Kircher?
Yes, thank you. I was wondering about the tree that came down, whether we have any further information about the tree. Did it break? Did it come up by the roots? I mean, I know that trees come down, since we've had several on our street come down during storms, but it's just a matter of concern that it's on a main thoroughfare for the town, a huge tree. And should we be doing, well, first of all, I'd be interested in feedback. And then the second part of this is there something further we should be doing or can be doing where we have these huge trees near critical thoroughfares or critical infrastructure?
So let's hear Town Manager Johnson, and then Beach, did you have something about the tree?
Yes,
You want to chime in about the tree then?
several years ago, and I'm not sure how long ago, there was a problem with that tree over the weekend. And I think it was that part of it fell down into the street. And Joe Chin and I were involved in talking to the homeowner who owned the tree and arranging, somehow we had to make some kind of arrangements so that somebody could work over the weekend. And the tree was in a dangerous condition. There was something left that was likely to fall. And we had to make some arrangement, and I forget what it was, to have a tree company able to work on the weekend to take care of that condition. I mean, I think they sawed off whatever was about to come down and got rid of it. But that raises another issue, of course, is that technically speaking, a tree company shouldn't be working on a weekend. And I'm not sure what arrangements we have to deal with that issue, but it probably is an issue we ought to think about.
Thank you. Town Manager Johnson.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I think there are some counties where you can actually buy email lists from the Registrar of Voters. I know that some people that are doing campaigns will purchase those mailing lists, so we can see if that's an opportunity in Marin County, and if so, what the cost would be. And that might be a way of really trying to hit every house. So we'll look into that.
That's a good idea.
Mhm.
Any other questions or comments? Let's see, Elizabeth, Councilmember Breckus, you weren't able to finish your last comment. Do you want to finish now?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's see. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this item? I don't see any raised. Oh, yes. David Allen Hughes.
Hi, Chief Mata, thanks for your detailed information about that tree. I just had a question. I recall reading about Sonoma County and their firestorms, and there was some question about how they were able to push notifications to residents regardless of whether or not they had signed up. I'm wondering if the town of Ross has the ability to do that in a geolocation or something to that effect.
My understanding is that the county, through the County Office of Emergency Services, there is a phone notification system that can push out a message. I've done it before. I don't know if it's subscription based. I don't think it is. I think they have that information. So that's definitely something we can look into. There's also Nixle, but that's a subscription service. You really have to sign up for it. So what we're trying to do is it's some people like email, some people like social media. So we're trying to cover all of our bases by bringing all of those things into this. But that's a great idea. I will look into it and get an answer to you. I see you often. I'll get an answer to you and to the council on that.
That's good. Thank you. My understanding is it's something similar to an Amber Alert, where it's a involuntary. You have to accept it, and you can target, a certain geographic location. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you. I don't see any other.
Oh, shit. I just, sorry. Hang on a second here. Mayor, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
So Chief Potter, this was really helpful. And I think, Julie, I agree. The idea of trying to get notifications out is really important. Did you have another comment, Julie?
Yeah, I just had one comment that a resident mentioned to me shortly, I think on Monday. And he said that after the 2005 flood, the town made arrangements with Marin Sanitary to go around and help get rid of excess debris. And so that may be something that we want to consider in the future if there is massive amounts of debris to help people out. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I think this was very helpful. It's helpful to know what's the status of the siren. It's helpful, I think, to hear about the need to have notifications and how we might be able to improve that. So thank you so much. If any final comments, or should we move on to the next item? Let's move to item number 16 then. And thank you, Chief Pata. So 16 is Town Council consideration of adoption of resolution number 2229, directing town staff to prepare and implementing ordinance and guidance documents regarding Senate Bill 9. Patrick?
Thank you, Mayor Robbins and members of the council. So this item is in response to recent legislation that was signed by the governor, Senate Bill 9, which substantially changes the way that local control applies to single-family zoning throughout the state. And as this council is likely aware, much of the town of Ross is R1, single-family zoning. Essentially what this Senate bill does is it allows for ministerial approval of a two-lot subdivision or a lot split. The terms ministerial and discretionary are two terms that are applied to decisions. Discretionary means that we can be subjective on it. We have a right to say yes or no to a project. Ministerial means that if it complies with with all objective standards, then it has to be approved. So for instance, a design review is a discretionary decision, but a building permit where something is compliant with California Building Code, that is a ministerial permit. So this would change what was traditionally a discretionary approval, a lot split, into a ministerial process. In addition, it gives a property owner development rights for ministerial construction of up to 2 units per lot. And this law would supersede anything that we have in regulations that are in conflict with it, but it does maintain any objective standards that we have in place up to the point that they wouldn't preclude this lot split from taking place or for development of a very modest 2 units. I think the maximum or the minimum square footage could be 800 square feet. So so most of the town's development standards remain in place, but it does take away that decision-making ability from the town. This law will go into effect at the first of the new year, and so the town needs to respond for how to address any potential applications that we could have coming in 2022. Some jurisdictions have chosen to adopt urgency ordinances. Town staff recommendation is that we spend the time to prepare and develop an implementing ordinance similar to what was done with the ADU legislation that came out a few years ago. And in the interim period, to prepare guidance documents that address all of the provisions in the legislation, as well as the relevant town standards, to help guide any applications that we do receive prior to adoption of this ordinance. And so staff's recommendation to the council is that the council adopt this draft resolution, which would direct us to prepare that ordinance, and in the meantime, prepare these guidance documents so that we're prepared for anyone that looks to take advantage of this new legislation. And this action does not qualify as the definition of a project per the California Environmental Quality Act. And that concludes the staff presentation on this item.
Thank you, Patrick. If a lot is divided into two, are the existing setback rules, do they still hold?
Yeah, the setbacks are objective standards, so those stay in place. However, they can't be to such a degree that it completely precludes development of the property.
Okay. Are there questions for Patrick? Councilmember McMillan.
Yeah, I have 2 questions, and one of them is I don't know if it's a big loophole or not. I'm hoping it's a good shield for us, and that is the whole public health and safety shield. And given that most of the town is in the WUI and a lot of the town is in the flood zone, I'm wondering to what extent can the public health and safety reduce the number of lots that are going to be susceptible to this kind of a split.
I'd be
My
happy.
other question is, I have heard that Belvedere and other jurisdictions have already hired very, very expensive consultants to help them with this new rule. And I don't know what the assignment is for the consultants and what kind of help they're going to lend. I'm just wondering if you think that we need to hire a consultant. It seems like a lot of people are running around in a panic.
I can answer the first question, and I'll let Patrick answer the second question. The first question, SB 9 already makes a prohibition about developing and subdividing and having housing projects in a floodplain or a fire zone. WUI does not count as a fire zone. So I don't think that would count. I mean, I would be, it'd be, first of all, there's no case law on this. And second of all, case law interpreting recent housing legislation has been very stringent against cities trying to reserve certain powers. So I think the health and safety requirements of a building official are already answered to some extent of what they can't do, because the legislation says they can't, deny it based on, if the entire property is not in the flood zone, we can't deny that. In regards to your, I'll let Patrick supplement my answer, but in regards to whether you should hire a consultant, I do think there is a bit of a panic mentality about this legislation. When it first came out, I had a very similar reaction to our clerk about 5 minutes ago. And then once I was able to, analyze it and understand what is actually happening to our cities, there will be people coming through and using it to their advantage. But I think places there was a recent study in Berkeley that was published that they don't think it's going to really result in that much housing or that much lot splits. Not to say there's not going to be zero, but a lot of cities have kind of rushed to, these urgency ordinances, which we have been recommending against. And then as far as consultants, you might need a consultant for, identifying objective design standards that you want to add for either the subdivision process or the housing process. And Patrick can speak to that. But most of it is really just Patrick and our office working together and going through and making sure we have, as much objective design standards that we can, that we want to put into the code that really address subdividing and the lack of discretion on design. But again, there's a recent case in San Mateo. The Court of Appeal is really clear against cities not to, we are losing our powers to do a lot of what we think is objective design standards. The courts are finding are not.
Yeah, and just to elaborate on that, as we prepare the ordinance, staff would make the determination as to whether or not additional consultants are needed. At first consideration of the standards, Ross is, as I mentioned in an earlier presentation, we already have very conservative development standards. And so to the extent that they'd apply to this legislation, I think it would preserve much of the town's interest as far as development goes. Additionally, we've had objective design standards prepared by a consultant previously using grant funding. So those need to be refined and adopted, but we have those prepared already. So it's unlikely that that additional consultant help would be needed. But if it is, then of course we'd request to have that in the planning budget, and we'd account for that.
Thank you. Julie?
Ben, what's the difference between the WUI and being in a fire zone?
I may have either Patrick or Richard address that. We just looked at that issue.
Yeah, so the legislation is specific about high fire severity zone. And I believe it's CAL FIRE that makes those definitions. The WUI is locally adopted, and that's wildland urban interface. And so while we can apply standards to that, and those can be objective standards, they are not an outright prohibition on development as is found in the legislation.
And I think to add on to that, if our building official believes there are certain things of that property that need to be addressed for health and safety that can be mitigated, then I think that's what the legislation allows us to do. Whether it's plantings or whatever sort of mitigation needs to be done on that property to make it less vulnerable if it's not in a high fire zone, but affects the health and safety, I think that's fair game.
Okay, thank you. Can't blame the bearer of bad news, I guess. Councilmember Kircher.
I was just wondering about the impact of SB9 on our local fairly strict ordinances with respect to lot coverage. So you have a large house that's within the FAR for that lot, and then you split it. Does the existing house that was right up to the margin of the FAR, does that become some sort of legal non-conforming use, and then we start over with a new lot on FAR?
Yeah, I think it's untested how this would all play out, but that is a likely scenario. If you've got a property that's already pushing the limits on FAR and lot coverage, and then the lot is split in half, it'll probably become a legal non-conforming unit, and the new lot would be subject to those same requirements. So the FAR and lot coverage would be calculated from the much smaller lot that's now created.
And then my second question is there, if we don't treat this as an urgency matter and follow the recommended path, which is to develop our ordinance in the regular course, is there a downside to that? I mean,
yeah, so if you don't adopt tonight,
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you don't adopt the resolution tonight, the resolution tonight is meant to provide the town with the most flexibility moving forward before we adopt our permanent ordinance. So if you don't do it, there's an argument that if someone came in tomorrow, a couple of provisions that we want to take advantage of, that SB 9 allows cities to take advantage of, like what Councilmember McMillan was talking about, the building official making findings based on health and safety for applications. If the council hasn't adopted that, we can't use that as a basis for conditions of approval. Likewise, there's also, if someone comes in and does a lot split and asks for 2 units on each lot, right now, with no adopted resolution, they'd also be entitled to ADU. So you could have 3, I mean, I don't think this is going to happen again, but you theoretically could have three houses or 3 dwellings on each lot. So six dwellings. So, you know, the resolution tonight says if they take advantage of both a lot split and a housing development, they can't also on top of that have an ADU. So those are kind of the status quo, to keep the status quo until staff has a chance to adopt a more comprehensive ordinance. Some cities, like I said, have adopted urgency ordinances, but again, I would not recommend that. And that's why we came forward with a resolution, which is effective immediately. And it doesn't create any new objective design standards, which is what some cities are trying to do with their urgency ordinances. Instead, we're going to look at those as a permanent fix when we bring an ordinance forward.
Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yes, that does. I think
Okay, then
that's a good-
Councilmember Cool.
Patrick or Ben, in what you're proposing for us to adopt in the section 1 of the resolution part of what you're proposing, we are saying that the town of Ross finds that the things authorized under SB 9 are a valuable form of housing. Now, I don't agree that it's a valuable form of housing. It's part of Sacramento's attempt to take over planning from local communities in order to force what they see as a need to make everybody let people build affordable housing all over the place. And I don't think we ought to say that it's a valuable form of housing, because if we want to protest at some later time something that's in SB 9, we're then we've hung ourselves because we've said we think it's valuable. I don't think it is valuable. I think for our community and many others in this state, it's a very bad idea. So we shouldn't prompt help. We shouldn't. Are we able to avoid tying our own hands by legislatively saying this is a valuable piece of legislation?
It's not critical to the resolution, but to give you context of why it's there is if someone challenges the town based on our resolution, and their argument is it's a pretext of trying to avoid our obligations under SB 9, it's nice to have a statement that that's not why this was adopted.
Even if it's an untrue statement.
But as I said, it's not critical.
Forget it. Okay. I vented.
Well, Beecher, you're proposing we just take out the word valuable?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interject myself here, but I think Ben has a point. We're not hostile to this. We're just protecting the public health and safety.
Okay. Ben.
Sorry, been quiet all night. Give me a chance to talk and I'll keep talking. I did find one typo I'd like to correct for the record on section 4. Yes, or sorry, it's section 4, subpoint 4. It says all SB 9 housing developments. That should say all SB 9 urban lot splits. So 3 and 4 deal with urban lot splits, and 1 and 2 deal with housing developments. They're
You know,
identical.
I think there's another typo in section 4 also. In section 4, 2B, I think something is missing, and it should say something like 1 off-street parking space per unit is required. we have a phrase and then we don't say, so what?
Yeah, and that's pulled straight out of SB 9. That's why it reads that way.
Okay. So that's another flaw with that thing that I hate.
Well, are there other, Councilmember Breckus?
I hope my internet is better. I just reset it. And just so you know, I've been listening by my phone. I would go along with Beach's idea to take out the word that he proposes. I think that's a noble protest. But, you know, it seems like there's nothing to do to modify this other than that, if anybody else is willing to go along with it.
I mean, I guess since Ben is advising not to, I would probably just go along with Ben because I don't really know. But you two are also both lawyers, so it's really hard for me to know whose advice to take.
Might I suggest Council or Mayor Pro Tem Cool make a friendly motion for a friendly amendment, and then we can have the council vote on that, whether to strike that language.
Okay, though, we haven't opened it up to members of the public yet, so why don't I do that? Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this item?
There are no raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, so we're back to ourselves now for
Well,
discussion.
actually, excuse me, it would he could either make the motion, or if someone else makes the motion, he can make the friendly amendment. So
Right. I'm sorry, Ben, tell us again why you don't think we should get rid of valuable. I sort of agree. It sounds like, why should it be valuable? Why do we have to say that? But tell us why you think it's not a good idea.
Well, what I first said in reaction to Vice Mayor Cool's suggestion is it's not critical either way. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's there in case someone challenges us to say that this was a pretext and we're trying to assert the authority given to us under SB 9. And we're really, the city is hostile to the implementation of SB 9. So that's why it's there. That's why cities are adopting findings like that. And well, I'll leave it at that.
I mean, I think just reading it, I think it reads fine and it's not hostile if you get rid of valuable. I mean, it still reads just fine, I think. So I'm okay with, just this is, we're talking about section 1. The town of Ross finds and declares that urban housing developments authorized under SB 9 are a form of housing that allows for the expansion of affordable and flexible housing options. That's how it would read if we get rid of valuable, correct?
Okay, well, I move that we approve this resolution 2229 with the, except that we eliminate the word valuable in section 1.
Second.
Okay.
Let's take a vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus
Aye.
and Councilmember Kircher?
Aye.
Councilmember Cool,
Aye.
Councilmember McMillan,
Aye.
and Mayor Robbins.
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Patrick and Ben. We hope you can help us through this as the months pass. Let's see, so that takes us to item 17, town manager update and council discussion on town activities in response to COVID. Town Manager Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just have a few bullet points for you. I've been receiving the county news, and just a couple of highlights is case rates have climbed over the past few weeks, but the County of Marin's hospitalization numbers have been quite low. This reflects the county's high vaccination rate. The first cases of influenza have been detected in the county, signaling the start of the flu season. Healthcare providers are urging everyone to obtain the protection of the flu vaccine and take steps to prevent the spread of germs. The County of Marin has a vaccine finder on their website. It was recently updated to include filters that will help guide vaccine seekers to available appointments. It'll be a lot easier to find available clinics, etc., when you use the filters. You can also find your vaccinations through your healthcare provider, medical clinic, or local pharmacy. I had the opportunity last Thursday to meet with many of the Marin County city managers. And currently, there is only one city council that is meeting in person, and that is the city council in Mill Valley. A few cities had planned to start meeting pretty soon in the new year in person. However, due to the emergence of the new Omicron variant, those plans have been placed on hold indefinitely. So we continue, Linda and I continue to try to keep track of what's happening with your fellow city councils, and we'll keep you posted with that information. When the town council is ready to consider restarting its in-person meetings, it is recommended that the council adopt a policy that would outline what that would look like in terms of if you would require participants to wear masks when they enter the council chambers or be vaccinated, and if so, if there would be exemptions, how it would all be implemented, so that when the council is ready to consider how you would go about starting to meet in person, let me know, and I will bring a report back to council in careful in lockstep with the city, with the town attorney, and provide some options and things for the city council to consider as you're putting together such a policy. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We keep hoping that it's time to set those policies, and it just never is. It keeps getting pushed back further and further. All right, thank you. Let's move on to item number 18. This is 14 Lagunitas Road, amendment to the use permit and town council consideration of adoption of resolution 2230. And this is Town Planner Weintraub.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members and Town Manager Johnson. I will start my video presentation. So Planner Matthew Weintraub reporting on item number 18, which is the use permit amendment to extend the Ross Preschool Summer Program at 14 Lagunitas Road, which is St. John's Episcopal Church, which is shown here in the photograph. And the property is located, at the northeast corner of Lagunitas Road and Shady Lane. The preschool operates within the church, which does have its own separate use permit amendment. The preschool uses building rooms in this building, and the designated outdoor play areas for the preschool are in the east and south lawns, which are fenced in areas in this location. And the designated primary drop-off and pickup location for the preschool is here in this parking lot. And here is a summary of the recent permit amendments for the Ross Preschool. In 2015, a use permit was granted to increase the enrollment from 24 to 40, and to allow that to occur in fall and spring sessions, Monday through Friday from 8 to 1 p.m. And that was a trial program for 3 years. Towards the end of that trial period in 2018, the council amended the use permit or approved an amendment to the use permit to allow for that, that program to continue indefinitely with no expiration, as well as to extend the hours of operation from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. The following year in 2019, the council approved a trial period for a summer program for in the months of July and August, again with a number of students being 40, and Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. And essentially creating a year-round preschool at that time. And now towards the end of that 3-year trial period, the applicant is requesting to have that renewed again with no expiration date. Public comments were, or I should indicate that the 500-foot notice area was implemented. Staff noticed all owners within 500 feet of the property, and no comments expressing concerns or objections have been received by staff. Numerous comments submitted in support of the project, and those are included in the staff report. Some key provisions and conditions of the existing program, which would be carried over in the new renewed program, are that the preschool would submit annual enrollment reports consistent with condition of approval number 1C. What was previously discussed and determined is that the town may not limit enrollment to Ross residents, so that's not part of the current or proposed amendment. As far as outdoor use, the existing designated play areas are, as I indicated, the south and east lawns, which are the fenced-in areas, consistent with the condition of approval. As far as noise, noise is governed by the existing general plan policy, which allows for up to 55 decibels for exterior use areas in residential zones, and also does allow for amplified music after 9 a.m., provided that that music does not create a nuisance or disturb the surrounding neighbors. And also with respect to traffic and circulation, these 4 existing conditions would be carried over, that the church parking lot remain the primary drop-off and pickup location, that there's no vehicle queuing on town streets, that the preschool continue to stagger its class times to minimize the traffic impacts, and that the preschool continue to monitor the parking drop-off and pickup and direct vehicles. So the applicant request in summary is to amend the existing use permit amendment to carry forward all the existing conditions and to allow the existing Ross preschool summer session program to continue without an expiration date. And staff does recommend approval of resolution number 2230 approving the use permit amendment. And the project is categorically exempt from CEQA under guidelines section 15322 for educational or training programs involving no physical changes. That concludes my presentation. The applicant, David Allen Hughes, is available also to present information, and I'm available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Are there questions for Matthew? I had one clarification. Oh, Councilmember McMillan.
Sorry, I just wondered, Matthew, if we received any objections from any residents.
No, staff has not received any objections.
I just had a clarification about the parking. I remember when we first talked about this, we talked about we considered requiring that the church parking lot be the drop-off spot, and we decided it wouldn't be required. But recently there have been these cones all along Lagunitas, saying please save this for the preschool. So I do support having the parking as much, the drop-off as much as possible being in the church parking lot, though it's a very awkward drop-off lot. But I don't think we should be having cones that, there shouldn't be this understanding that cars can, that several parking spots on that side of the street are kept open for the drop-off. So how does that work? That's been very recent, and yet it doesn't sound like it's part of the use permit.
Yeah, so the language of the use permit identifies the parking lot as the primary pickup and drop-off location. Doesn't specify that it be the only pickup and drop-off, but it also does not allow for queuing on town streets. In discussions with David, it appears that the cones that are put out on Lagunitas are often for midday bus trips when they need a bus to come in and pick students up and then drop them off again. It's usually in the midday period from, I believe, around noon or so, 12 to 1, which would not be during the primary pickup and drop off periods. So from what we understand, those cones don't actually relate to student pickup and drop off. Technically there should be some permission being asked to cone off those spaces, but because it seems to be occurring on a fairly irregular basis and just for the purpose of bus trips, it doesn't seem to be in direct conflict with the use permit.
Gee, I'm not sure I agree. I think that if they've got a bus, they should use the church parking lot, but let's see, Councilmember Breckus, your hand is raised.
Thank you. I had the exact same point. I don't know. I'm not there enough to know how often it's happening, but I've seen it on a number of occasions, and I was really surprised because if the language was not strong enough to express that pickup and drop off was supposed to be in the parking lot, that was the intent. That was definitely the discussion. And maybe it meant like, yeah, you could walk your kid in from another spot, but I find it really incorrect for them to put cones out. I mean, how do they have any right to do that any more than I do as a private resident? So that really bothers me. And I think we need to make it clear that that's not okay. And I noticed it on 2 occasions when I went to the school with tons of parents, and all those spaces were being held. And so, it shouldn't be at their liberty. And I don't really understand why they're taking buses. I guess maybe they're doing field trips, but if they are, they need to use the private property they're renting and paying a lot of money for, and they need to work that out with the landlord. So I feel the exact same way as Elizabeth is. And I think if anybody was listening to the prior conversation when we had that discussion about it, it would be crystal clear that that was what we were saying. And I know you weren't there, Matthew, but that was what was discussed.
It was almost a requirement. It was almost a condition of the use permit. And then I think the decision was, well, let's see if it's okay for cars to drop off on Lagunitas and not require it. But it was discussed as a condition. Councilmember Cool. Beach, you're muted.
I drive by that location almost every day in the early afternoon, 1:30, 2:30, something like that. I see the cones. I don't think I've ever seen a vehicle parked there. Suppose we said you can't put out cones. People still can park there. So I think it's kind of a tempest in a teapot that we're talking about right now. Thank you.
Maybe, maybe we'll just, that was my question. Maybe we'll discuss it a little bit more. We'll see if there are other questions. Then we'll see members of the public, then we can come back and discuss that. Other questions for Patrick? Councilmember McMillan.
I'm just wondering if maybe we should allow the applicant to address this issue.
Sure, but any other questions for Patrick? And if not, then we'll move to members of the public, and that would be David Allen Hughes.
All right. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you and welcome Town Manager Johnson. And then thank you, of course, Mayor Robbins and all the council members and to Matt for putting together that presentation. I was sitting here cringing as you all were speaking about the cones because I made a mistake and I addressed that with the town about a month ago when they contacted me. I had been under a false impression from an in-person conversation I had had with the town at the beginning of the school year, and I had totally misunderstood what was said, and I fully own it. And we had some, and the moment I had that conversation, I don't remember when it was, about a month ago, or 3 weeks ago, I can't remember exactly when, we immediately removed the little drop-off cone areas, with the exception of Thursdays from noon to 2. There's about 2.5 parking spaces that we have that we set aside for a bus, and we have a sign that says bus from noon to 2 on Thursday that we try and remember to put out on Wednesdays. The bus in the parking lot would be probably a pretty major traffic nightmare for Shady Lane to try and get in and turn a full-size bus into the lot unless it was totally empty at that time, which would make it a little bit easier. But even just me backing my car out of that lot in a standard size car is a tricky one. I think, we have a sign up at the parking lot that makes it specific to be known that this is a drop-off zone for our families. We have told all of our families that this is a space for them, and most of our families do use that space. There's a very large majority of our families who on days where it's not pouring rain will either ride their bikes to school. And we actually had to buy an extra bike rack to accommodate the additional bikes that we had, which was great. And we have quite a few families in the neighborhood who also walk to the preschool. We have a number of families. We staggered and even further, without any prompting from the town, even further staggered our start times and our end times for the preschool to try and help further mitigate traffic on just in downtown Ross, which has always been, there's always been traffic, and we wanted to try and do our part. What we found as well, though, is we have quite a few families who have children in both schools. And so sometimes what happens is these families drop off at, I think it's 8:20 or so for Ross School drop off. And then, we have one class that starts at 8:30, another one starts at 8:45. And so for some of these families, I think the stagger time actually makes it a little bit more challenging in terms of getting people to move cars, because they're actually sitting there and waiting for an extra 15 or 20 minutes. So we, proactively, made a policy decision on our side to allow families who have children in the elementary school as well to be able to drop off a little bit earlier at the preschool as well, so that they can drop those children off and then hopefully, move out of the downtown in their vehicles, or if they walked. So yeah, that's.
Thank you. Well, let's, I think there are any other comments? Well, we're not sure how to run this. I guess there are no other comments from other members of the public. One question is, what is, not me to, ask like what's your curriculum, but aren't these 3-year-olds? So why do they need a bus in the middle of the day?
That's a great question. So it's actually, it's a gymnastics bus, and they don't go anywhere. The bus doesn't go with the children. The bus has no seats inside. It's designed as a gymnastics studio for preschool children. So the bus pulls up, and then the children get walked to the bus, and they do some activities which are good for them, and the gymnastics pieces, and then they do about half an hour in one group, and then they walk back and another group comes. So the bus pulls up hopefully somewhere that doesn't require kids to walk too far from the main preschool areas, and then they hop into the bus, and then the bus is there for about an hour and 10 minutes or so with a little buffer, and then they depart without any children on the bus.
I guess, I still am struggling with, savings parking spots in a very, the downtown's congested most of Thursdays, because, you'd be blocking it off early because you don't want anyone there until your bus comes. Why not have the bus in the church parking lot? I mean, it can pull in and then back out.
If that's what the council requests, we're happy to try that. My assumption would be that it would be quite difficult for traffic and congestion. We even had a moving truck that wasn't ours, that was trying to pull into the church just the other day, and that by itself created a backup down both sides of Shady Lane and onto Lagunitas, and it was smaller than our truck, or our bus was. Sorry.
Councilmember McMillan.
David, have you received any complaints from any Ross residents about the bus being on Lagunitas for an hour on Thursdays?
No, I have not. I have not, and we've tried to make our sign that we put out to make it very clear. There are people that will park in that spot, during the daytime, and we have it says, quite clearly Thursdays, and we put it out usually, if we remember, on Wednesday night. And because 90%, if not more, of the parking that happens in front of St. John's Church on that whole strip of 14 Lagunitas there are teachers or administrators at Ross Elementary School. It's without a doubt. And so it's just as a sort of courtesy request to them, if they could, park somewhere else, we'd be happy to, we'll do whatever, of course, the town council recommends or requests or requires of us. But no, I haven't had anything like that. And so we do have people who park there in the morning time, and then, or to do drop off or do pickup. And then, they move onwards before that sort of small noon to 2 window.
Did the signs say what time? You say it's an hour. Do your signs say, please Wednesday 1 to 2 p.m. or something? I thought it just said no parking ever. I mean, that was, I mean, not no, not ever, but when I've seen them, it looked like, you can't park there, period. It might help if you said, 1 to 3 or something. I mean, maybe, at least for me, I'd feel more favorably inclined towards something that, lets people park there except when you have your program.
Yeah, there's two pieces at play here. One was we had a sign up, which was one I referred to that I made a mistake on. And those signs are no longer. And those are most likely the ones you're referring to, Mayor Robbins. We do have now we only have one sign, and that sign has a picture of a school bus on it, and it says bus parking Thursdays noon to 2 in very big letters. Realistically, it's 1 to 2, but my experience has been if we write 1 to 2, someone will be there until 1:05, and then the bus is having problems, driving around. So we chose to put noon to 2 to try and encourage that space there.
Okay. Councilmember Breckus.
I'm a proud parent of alumni of the Ross Preschool, and David, I really want you to be successful. And in fact, it seems like you have been great in that space, and I'm happy for that. But I feel like this is a perfect conversation for the use permit. And I still have a kid at Ross School, and granted, she walks most of the time, so parking is less of an issue for me. But I just would say that parking is a really big issue around the downtown. And I know if Carla Small were on the council still, she'd say, well, we all should just walk. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of parents have to rush in, do an hour volunteer, leave, whatever. It's a problem. And anybody who thinks it's not a problem isn't a parent having to park around the downtown all the time. And I just think I understand you made a mistake, and thank you for correcting that. But I think it's an overreach for you to ask for these spaces. And, if you need to rent an extra space within the Episcopal Church to have that, fine. If what you're requiring is a bus, then I think you should ask for it to be on the property that you pay a lot of money to be on. And I just don't think it's fair request to the school for you to take that space. And, I get it, you didn't know, but it's not with permission, and it's within our right to extend it. I'm just suggesting that I'm not sure that's the right thing to do here, because you have a landlord, you have a lease, and it seems to me that you can, make that request to them, and should. So that's how I feel. And it's no different than all of the residents that we hear from all the time who put a rock in front of their house they don't want to be parked in front of. They want to claim it for their own, or they don't want people parking there. And I don't really see that it's any different. And so I just think that we shouldn't give that special privilege. That's it.
Who else would like, I kind of agree. Who else would like to comment? Matthew, and then Julie.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out that the existing and the proposed use permit amendment do not address or authorize this bus parking situation that's being discussed. To some extent, it's an extraneous issue to the use permit itself. The council could act on the use permit, and it would not affect the disposition of this bus issue, which is currently not authorized. So I just want to make that clear, that it's not in the current use permit, nor is it proposed to be part of the current use permit. The use permit just covers pickup and drop off of students for the daily classroom programs, the beginning and the end of the day, basically.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Well, we certainly could approve the use permit. I guess the question is, do we want to keep talking about, or we could certainly vote on the use permit. The question is, do we want to keep talking about the parking issue? Elizabeth, what do you think about, well, I mean, why don't we take a straw poll about the parking issue? I mean, I think Elizabeth and I don't mean to be ogres here, but it just doesn't seem like it's correct to be able to take parking spaces. And it is tight parking, and the school's gone from 24 students, 9 to 1 to 40 students, 8 to 5. So there is more parking that's being used, more parking for staff because there are more staff, more parking for parents coming and going. It's a great resource. I mean, people, it's kind of become a school/daycare, and the town's never had anything like that for younger children. And I think that's a huge benefit. And it seems like it can't be limited to Ross families, but it seems like Ross families who want to be a part of it are able to. So, I mean, this is great for Ross. I just see it kind of as Elizabeth does. I don't quite get the parking. Not sure it's fair to give up the parking. But I'm fine to approve the use permit. David, you're the only one with a hand up. Go ahead.
All right, thanks. If I could just address the parking piece one more time. I mean, definitely parking in many downtowns, and definitely Ross is a prime example, is really tricky. And I think, yeah, as Matthew said, this is not specifically related to the vote, I guess, but I do think it's important for me to address, at least here, what we are doing at this point. And if this is something the council says stop doing, we will stop doing it, regardless of whether or not there's a formal vote or not. I mean, we will, we can hear from a phone call today if that's the request. We would hope to be able to continue to have a very small section of 2.5 cars worth for a 2-hour period once a week during the school year. That is that we can put up, and we're happy to work on the signage on our little A-frame that says this is a courtesy, this is a you're welcome to park here, but we ask that you don't. I mean, if there's anything that would help that would help make it feel more comfortable. I think the bus piece going to the parking lot, the issue is not whether or not the landlord, St. John's Church, would approve it or not. I think they would say, okay. The tricky piece then is that there's all those other cars that are in there. If there is a bus parked in there, they can't either get in nor can they get out. So then we would need to make it so that the parking lot is not accessible from noon to 2 or 12:30 to 1:45 or whatever that time zone is, and then those cars are going to end up taking up more spaces. So we would win one bus spot, but we would lose however many spots there are, 12 spots or whatever it is in the church parking lot. And then I guess the other option is that we cancel this as part of our program and no longer offer gymnastics through this program to our families, which is something that we can do as well. I mean, we're here, we're part of the community. I feel very strongly for us to be contributing neighbors as well as community members. And so if we are doing something that's causing an issue in the town, we do want to address it, and we'll do what it takes to address it. So thank you.
Thank you. So there's one other member of the public with a comment, Dave Peterson. Linda, can you bring him in? I didn't notice his hand was up.
I'm bringing him in.
Thank you.
Go ahead, David.
David, you're still muted.
Okay. Oh, and there's the camera too. They just came in. I would just comment that we're talking, keep a perspective here. I've had trouble parking there when I had kids in school and so on, but have some perspective. This is 2 hours, 1 day a week, in the middle of the day when there is some traffic coming and going, and it's not during a typical pickup and drop off at the school, which would be in conflict. I think that the preschool is such an asset to the town and the surrounding community that and the value of giving the kids some physical activity and coordination exercises is a very, very good thing. And I'll just mention that my granddaughter's just been accepted, so I have a particular interest there. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Let's bring it back to the council level now. Any other comments or discussion? Our options are we make a formal ruling about the bus, or we just remain silent about the bus and approve the use permit, or vote on the use permit. And the bus issue could come up at another meeting if we wanted. I think those, we make a decision about the bus now, we ignore the bus, and if we ignore the bus, it could come up at any time that we wanted it on the agenda. Councilmember McMillan.
Could we ignore the bus for now and just have the staff pay attention to what's going on Thursdays between 12 and 2 and see if it's really a big deal or not and if it is a big deal, then bring the bus thing back later. Let's vote on the use permit now. And then if it is really an issue, then we can always look at that later.
Oh, okay, Councilmember Breckus.
I mean, I feel differently. 2:00 is exactly when the kindergarten gets out. And at 2:45 is when 1 through 4 gets out. So I'm fine voting for this use permit, but I don't think that we just turn a blind eye. They are asking, if they're going to ask to block off these spaces, they need to get permission. It has to either be part of a use permit, I think, or they are violating the law because they have no more right than I do to block off spaces in town.
Do you think a different time, like if it's 11:30 to 1, is that, would that, maybe that would make it a better trial?
I think they should go, as he just said, the landlord would probably agree to let them use the parking lot. They should use the parking lot. If they have to have somebody help them to back out, then they should do that. They should explore other options. I just think it's a little over the top, not appropriate for them to say, we've decided to now, we're essentially for classroom purposes using parking spaces in the town. I mean, I don't know. I mean, how would we feel if Ross Rec suddenly was running programming in our sidewalk using spaces? I mean, it's not anything against the Ross preschool. It's the fact that this is a perfect classic thing that needs a use permit to be able to continue, and they don't have it, and it shouldn't be allowed. And I don't think that we should eliminate parking in the downtown for a private, not for-profit school. I just don't agree with that. It's my view. I may be in the minority, but that's how I view it.
No,
And I don't think that we should just turn a blind eye to it, nor do I think we should. I mean, they should apply for it. And if staff wants to write a report because they think that there's no big deal, then I guess we could look at that. But I don't think it should proceed in some different way. And I mean, it really is like very much like our encroachment permit. We addressed that because we had residents putting rocks in the right of way and blocking off spaces in front of their home. I don't know that it falls under anything differently.
Madam Mayor, point of order. I want to raise a point of order. We have been told by our staff, and I think they're right, that this is not part of what we are now considering. This issue is not agendized. If somebody wants to request it or bar it or whatever, they can request it to be put on some future agenda, but it is inappropriate to consider it now because it is not agendized.
I don't agree with that. I think that it is part of the use permit. We could amend the use permit to add it within this topic. I certainly think it could come back for another day, but I would strongly disagree with the idea that this is outside of the discussion.
Well, if my memory serves me correctly, a point of order is not debated. It is voted on without debate.
Well, maybe we need our counsel to advise us as to whether this is outside of the agenda.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think both of you have a point. How's that? In that we can't decide whether or not to allow parking for the bus. I mean, in essence, it's an encroachment permit, what they would need. And Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I view it is right now, the current use permit doesn't allow it. And that's what's before the council. If they want to be able to have this bus parked for this, repeated program, they would need an encroachment permit. So the encroachment permit issue is not on the agenda. However, as Councilmember Breckus points out, the use permit is open today by their application. And we have evidence in the record establishing that they're in violation of their use permit because of their lack of using for their operations town property that are not subject to their use permit. So, either way, I think direction would be needed, because I think if you want to have the use permit voted on today and direct staff to follow up with the applicant about an encroachment permit, you could handle it that way. Or you could be explicit as a condition of approval for this use permit prohibiting buses using or not even just buses, prohibiting classroom activities to use the public right of way without an encroachment permit.
Bill, you haven't commented one way. I mean, do we want to try? I guess let's figure out the process first. Do we want to decide tonight? Is this permitted, or do we want to have them come back with a request for an encroachment permit? I sort of prefer the latter. I think it's a little simpler, but I'm fine with either. I do agree. It has to be addressed. It has to be either a yes or a no, and set the hours and set the days, because it's not, I mean, it isn't, this isn't what you can do. You can't just do that. So let's see if people want to have them come back for an encroachment permit. Or do we keep discussing this and try to decide it tonight? Councilmember Breckus.
Can you remind me off the top of my head, an encroachment permit is a staff? I mean, I guess I haven't looked at their encroachment permit ordinance with view of this item. And I just it seems like they should have a use permit to expand their rental space into town property as opposed to encroachment permit, although maybe there is some, but it also seems to violate our encroachment permit, but I just don't really remember how that works.
Usually, I mean, again, you can handle it both ways. When you're asking for a use and they're trying to use that use in our public right of way, you can either handle it on a reoccurring encroachment permit or as a condition of approval to the use permit. If you had a use permit, I mean, I'd have to review your encroachment ordinance again, but it's my understanding that's how staff would address something outside the use permit being reopened. If any applicant wanted to use our public right of way for either a one-time event or a reoccurring event, they could use, they could request an encroachment permit. And Matthew, I don't know if the town has ever issued an encroachment permit for uses of a business for an ongoing activity, but some cities do that.
Ben, I can answer that question.
Hey, Mitch, I'm gonna let Town Manager Johnson speak first. She had her hand raised, and then Rich speak after her.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring up the issue. Kind of my first reaction to this is it's very interesting. Gymnastics on a bus, but it's the business. They need a business license and they need the ability to conduct their business on city property. So it seems to me that it's more the business than the preschool. And does the town want to allow a business to operate in a bus on a street? And so I think we could also look into the business license aspect, and as if that business complies with our town codes. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Okay. Thank you. Rich, go ahead.
So we have a similar, not exactly the same, but a similar condition where the PG&E or a PG&E contractor is doing all of the tree work within town. So I'll issue a annual encroachment permit that gets reviewed every year. And that allows them to conduct their business within the town maintained right of way. So it's kind of a similar instrument than what we're looking for. I think it's true. We can either do an encroachment permit or we can do it with a use permit, but I think the encroachment permit might be more flexible in that we review it every year ministerially and go from there. But it sounds like we could go either way.
I mean, one thing that's sort of ironic here is, I mean, the preschool is beloved, but when we started expanding it, the hours and the students, we did talk about traffic. I think if we had, at that point, we'd been asked, can we have more parking, one afternoon a week? We would have just said no. And, now it's sort of happening. And, it sounds like a cute program, but it isn't something that we would have said, yes, that sounds fine at the beginning. We would have said, yes, go ahead and, well, we did say, yes, go ahead and expand the hours and the numbers, but I don't know that we were worried even then about parking. I mean, is there some way to do gymnastics inside? I mean, and Krista does have a point. It is a business on the street. So I don't really know where we go with this. I don't know how we address this. This is a bit of a, wrinkle. Councilmember Breckus and then Beach.
Well, I would be prepared to make a motion to approve the use permit as presently proposed, with the idea that if they want to come back with a use permit to request it and explain why this is appropriate. Hey, look, every day on Thursdays, we've taken pictures of all the parking available and this is really not a problem. And, or this, I mean, do we even know if this bus has insurance? I mean, I just think that it's, this needs to be looked at and it shouldn't be just done administratively. It seems like a real departure. And so I'd be fine approving it, and with the idea that this use should not continue. And if they want to come back to the council with a request, I think it should be a well-vetted, thought out rationale, with the idea that we're setting precedent. I mean, it would set precedent. What's to stop, the bike shop from having a food truck in front, or Ross Rec from having these kind of things? I mean, so I'm willing to cede the floor to Mayor Pro Tem Cool, but otherwise I'd make a motion.
So was that a motion, Elizabeth? I thought you made a motion.
I'll move to approve this particular item with any further request to amend it for the town parking to come back before the council.
Is there a second? I'll second it.
Okay, let's take the vote. How do you vote, Councilmember Breckus?
Aye.
And Councilmember Kircher?
I'm going to vote aye on approving the CUP without adding anything about the parking situation.
Right, and Councilmember Cool?
I'm voting no because I don't think anything about parking should be part of this motion because it hasn't been agendized.
I don't think they were voting on the parking, are you?
She made it part of the motion.
Okay. Councilmember McMillan
Aye.
and Mayor Robbins.
Aye.
So we have 4 in favor and 1 opposed. Motion passes.
So then, Matthew, maybe you can work with David and we can figure out what our next step, and Ben and Krista with her point about it's a business, and we can figure out how we move forward on this. Thank you. On to item number 19, council correspondence. Has anyone received any correspondence to share? So I have just one, which is a kind of a repeat, which is a complaint about Branson and they're using loudspeakers at a football game on a Saturday. I'm not sure if that person called you, Patrick. They said they would, but they also said, I don't want to be a complainer, so I don't know, but has it gotten back to Branson that neighbors are complaining about their loudspeakers? Or should I ask you to tell Branson that we're getting complaints?
I would ask any member of the council that receives complaints about Branson to forward them to me, and I'll pass it along to the school. That particular complaint was not received by me, but I did get it from you, Mayor, and I passed that information along to the administration at Branson.
Okay. I mean, I think they've been told, okay, great. Thank you so much. I don't have any other correspondence. Does anyone else have correspondence? Okay, then item B, future council items. Councilmember Cool. Mayor Pro Tem.
I request that the issue of the Branson use permit application, which has been pending since last March, be put on the agenda for decision, for hearing and decision next month.
I don't know that we can say that we are absolutely voting on something with the first time. I don't think you can only put what you want on the agenda, not the outcome. Isn't that correct?
I don't think so. I mean, it would be different if I were just requesting some discussion. I'm not requesting that. I'm requesting a vote and a decision.
I guess since I think this is something that might take like maybe 2 meetings to discuss, wouldn't want to commit us to a decision when I'm
Well,
not
if
even
there's a
sure.
second person who joins my request, it's got to be put on the agenda. That's all we have to do is find out if there's a second person. And maybe there isn't.
I guess not. Councilmember McMillan.
I just want to make a comment. I don't want to, violate the rule that you're not supposed to talk about an item that's not on the agenda. But I think it's dependent on whether or not the staff is ready to recommend that it be on the agenda. And I think it's more staff driven than what we want.
Well, if you're right, anytime the staff doesn't want something heard, they can just say, we're not ready. And then it means nothing that the council wants to hear an issue.
I think though, Beach, there's not yet a second person who wants to put this on the agenda the way you've stated it. So
I understand that.
any other item? I guess then if there are no other hands raised for agenda items, then we are adjourned. Thank
Happy
you.
holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays. Yes.
Same to you.
you.
Holidays.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Bye.
Right.